Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. John Bush here with the Live Free Now show, bringing you the news, views, tips, and tools you can use to live a free, prosperous, and healthy life. Always a pleasure to be rocking and rolling, moving and grooving with you every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central. Today, we are going to be joined by the one, the only Ricky V of the Ripple podcast. We're going to be talking about some of the craziness going down in the streets these days and how we can make sense of it all, and maybe some commentary on the modern truther movement. And we'll talk purpose, finding a sense of purpose. I did an interview with Ricky maybe a couple of years ago, and we really hit it off, and it was great to learn about him and talk shop and life beyond just conspiracies. What's up, Catherine? How are you? So we are going to continue on with the show. Before we get to the interview, I just want to shout out one of our sponsors real quick. The one, the only Above Phone, abovephone.com. But definitely check out, we got a special link for you to check out. Let me pull that link up right here. So Above Phone does de-Googled phones, which people can do on their own, right? But if you use Above Phone, they have it all done for you. Very simply, they make life easy. And on top of that, if you're not the most tech-savvy person, they have a free 45-minute consult that will help you to get onboarded. So head over to abovephone.com/livefree, abovephone.com/livefree, and they have select phones that are $150 off. So make sure you use that URL, abovephone.com/livefree. They have the smartphones, tablets, and laptops too. But like I said, it's not just the phone. You could make your own de-Googled phone. I don't know that's the easiest thing, but there's instructions and tutorials. But they do it for you, and they got this whole suite of different apps that you can use with private messaging and server space and all sorts of good stuff. So abovephone.com/livefree. Okay, so as you know, everything's going crazy in the world. What's new? The Charlie Kirk assassination was a really big deal. And just a couple days before that, in large part because of that woman from Ukraine that was stabbed in the neck on a bus, and then everybody on the bus just sat there and didn't even render aid to this woman. I saw the response to that and how a lot of people are getting really pissed off. So I made a Facebook post and said, I have a feeling things are about to pop off in this country. And then a day or two later, the Charlie Kirk assassination, which was a really huge deal. Politically motivated assassinations in an era of immense division and volatility is a big recipe for disaster. I guess it was the same kind of vibe and energy in the 60s as well. I mean, people are fed up, pissed off, struggling financially. That makes a huge difference. If everybody's content and at peace and able to make ends meet and life's going good at home, there's less likely to be civil unrest. Take a look back at the George Floyd riots and protests. That all popped off and was even more intense because it was during the lockdowns. And of course, when there was anti-lockdown and Trump protests and rallies, it was a huge concern. But the George Floyd protests weren't a concern. Either way, same thing today. People are struggling. People are fed up. It's like there's a bunch of pressure that's building up. And then just today, wouldn't you believe it, we hear news that a Dallas ICE facility had a shooting take place. And so I don't know if they were shooting at the ICE agents, but apparently 3 detainees. Remember, the ICE agents used the detainees as a human shield? I don't know. I don't want to make light of that. But 3 people were injured. The guy took his own life that was shooting. A second victim has died. Okay, so 2 people have died. Sniper shot himself. Huge deal. There's old Ted Cruz. And we only can expect this to ramp up intensively, not only the volatility and division, but of course, as always tends to happen when there's some sort of crisis, some sort of attack, some sort of murder, shooting, a massive ramp up of the police surveillance state. And this ICE issue and immigration has become extremely divisive. And a lot of the lefties and radicals are fighting back. And so I just am sensing a recipe for disaster in this country. And I just really want to encourage people, and we'll get more into this when we bring Ricky on, but I really want to encourage people during these crazy times to do everything you can to maintain center, because it's my belief that part of the agenda is a sheer information overload, overwhelm, intensity, intent with the intention and an intensity, an intended intensity with the intention of throwing you off of your groove, and in turn making you more susceptible to their programming, to the volatility. I remember there was a period during COVID when there was just so much breaking news and like breaking down the conspiracy side of it all, and new lockdowns and new updates, and what are they going to say next, and what's Trump going to do next, and we just uncovered this element of this past drill that's coincides with this and that. And it was like intense for a while, and I was absolutely glued to my phone and had this anxiety and had trouble sleeping. So it takes you off of your groove. It takes you off of your center. And that's the exact same phenomenon that's taking place right now. Now, since COVID popped off, I've been through a lot of adversity in my life, and I've done a lot of spiritual work, and I strongly feel that I'm more equipped to manage and handle this. But the very first part is, at the very least, to be aware that your attention is being manipulated. Your attention is being pulled deliberately to focus on this stuff. And the outrage machine is being ramped up. And the algorithms, especially on platforms like X, are being deliberately manufactured, intensified, so that people become even more divisive. I mean, there was a period on X where I was just getting served up so many brutal, violent videos of stabbings and beatings. And then a lot of it was race oriented. And then you're scrolling through, and it's like a whole crew of black folks that are like beating somebody up in high school or whatever. Then you scroll a couple more posts down, it's this absolute racist rhetoric, and you could tell what's going on. And so now we have even more death, brutality, shooting. School shootings are still happening. It's I think something big is going to happen. Small, medium, small, big, Kirk assassination, smallish, medium, something big. It's all working up. And you can bet your bottom dollar that in the wake of it, we will see a dramatic acceleration in the Palantir, Panopticon, Trump surveillance, digital ID system. So maintain your center, focus on what you have control over, identify your purpose, set some goals, and laser focus on that stuff. Don't be naive about what's going on in the world. Of course, we all want to know, we all want to be prepared, but don't get sucked in. Don't let your attention get sucked in. Because again, that's part of the agenda. And the more goal-oriented, the more purpose-driven and mission-driven you happen to be, the less susceptible you'll be to this crazy pendulum and this crazy attention psyop, which is bringing people into the next stage of the Great Reset in Panopticon society. Problem, reaction, solution. Never let a good crisis go to waste. Stay centered, friends. Stay free. All right, let's bring up the one, the only Ricky V. Ricky V, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. So let us know who you are, what the ripple effect's all about, if the audience isn't familiar with your work, and then let's just dive right into it and hit some of these latest news items and conspiracies. And I do want to spend some time talking about purpose and cutting through the noise and what's the meaning behind all of it. But first, of course, classic question when you introduce a guest: who's Ricky V?
Yeah, so I'm just a regular guy who basically, wanted to do something with purpose, like you mentioned. I Portuguese immigrant, came to America when I was 4. Just kind of old school parents, farming parents. Where I was born in Chaves, northern Portugal, and then came to America. Started, I guess trying to fit in, and then eventually got into a bunch of different things like music and sports and nutrition and health and all that type of stuff. But the podcast story kind of starts where my music story ends. I was in a band for many years, a metal, kind of like industrial slash metalcore band, with a couple close friends. And typical band story, we all grew up on the same street, and then we're like, hey, let's start a band. And we used to practice in my parents' garage. And then as we got older, life kind of got in the way. It got hard to keep the band together and keep people showing up to practices, and just personal things in their own personal lives were getting in the way. So then I started something called Theory 6, which was just my solo project. I still wanted to create something, so I started creating music on my own, and kind of just doing everything actually, in the studio was what it was built for. It was for my solo music project. And then I really got into podcasts. I was working kind of, a typical 9 to 5, well, not really 9 to 5, because I was construction. So I was waking up at, early, 7 to, 3 every day, but driving 2.5, 2 hours, just a lot of long days on the road. And I got into podcasts. And then during this time, I'm like, you know what? Like, I really like podcasts. It seems to be like one of the few places where you can get organic conversation and really listen to people share ideas and challenge ideas. And I already have a studio, so it shouldn't be too hard to convert it to a podcast studio and kind of, give it a try and see if I can do something with this podcast thing. And at the time, I felt like I was late to the party. It was 2013. I was ready, like, really deep into Joe Rogan and others who started before me. Yeah, I was really into James Corbett and whatnot. I've always been a fan of kind of, anything that's thought-provoking, documentaries, music, anything that kind of went against the grain. But it wasn't until I got into podcast and I'm like, oh, okay, like this is awesome because I can listen to it while I'm doing mindless stuff, like just driving a 2-hour commute or cutting the grass or whatever. Like that can be a useless part of my day, or it can be a useful part of my day where I can listen to something that sparks new ideas or learn something new while I'm doing it. And so like I said, I just got obsessed with it, took my music studio, turned it into a podcast studio, named the podcast after one of my songs that the Theory 6 solo music project created called The Ripple Effect, and then used it as my theme song, used it as the name of the podcast, and then just started podcasting little by little, started building just my networking and making friends. And, some of my real early guests, like Dr. Brzezinski, who is famous for the Eric Merola documentary about the business of cancer and his treatment for cancer and his whole battle with the FDA and whatnot, and how his treatment was suppressed. I had him on, had Douglas Ruskoff, who wrote President Shock and was a regular on Rogan a long time ago, Jason Burmis from Loose Change, Daniele Bignelli from History on Fire, and just tons of Dan Carlin, tons of Eddie Bravo. So I just got James Corbett. So a lot of I was really lucky to have a lot of these awesome guests take the time to come on the show. And then as time went by and I started making friends and networking and whatnot, the show expanded. And then, I have, and then that's kind of the origin story of the Ripple Effect podcast. And really it's very Rogan-esque in regards to, I'm a very curious person. I'm into diet and nutrition. So I have people on like Rob Wolf and who wrote Sacred Cow and is the founder of Element Electrolyte, and and Dr. Dominic D'Agostino and people like that. And then I'm also into conspiracies and historical stuff and all those type of things, and musicians. So if you like Rogan, it's kind of like a alternative show to Rogan. We go, I think, much deeper into certain topics because we can, but we also were one of the first people to have Dr. Peter McCullough on and Dr. Robert Malone before they were on Rogan, which got me kicked off YouTube. I am back on YouTube, so you can find the show on YouTube. And then I know some people see this in the back during Ripple Effect podcast episodes. And if you don't know what that show is, during COVID, when this was happening and a lot of us were getting banned and losing our YouTube channels, a bunch of us came together. It was me, Sam Tripoli from the Tinfoil Hat podcast, Charlie Robson from Macroaggressions, and Midnight Mike from the OBDM. We're all kind of hanging out, doing a swap cast. And it was actually Mike who came up with this term while we were talking about us, kind of like a union coming together, trying to figure out how do we push back against the censorship? How do we get this information out there? Mike comes up with this term. He's like, yeah, we're kind of like the union of the unwanted, kind of referring to how we're unwanted by big tech and mainstream and whatnot. And then we're like, oh, that's an awesome name. There's a ring to it. So he actually bought the URL during the episode. And then we didn't know what we're going to do with it. But eventually we're like, hey, like we like that term. Like, let's kind of get everybody together and let's do like a giant swap cast. And this was, like I said, at the height of COVID, so a lot of people were kind of dealing with censorship. We wanted to figure out, like, what were people doing, how were they fighting it, what type of censorship were they seeing, and then what are our alternatives, platforms, and methods to kind of get this information out there. And a lot of people were just struggling. Like, a lot of people who were doing this for a living, they're getting shadow banned, or being completely censored. And we did a huge show. Ben Swan was on it. Luke from We Are Change. I'm trying to think. We had like just an awesome cast of people on there. James Corbett, and then eventually we kind of liked the idea of doing a roundtable discussion show from time to time. So it kind of was a spinoff and ended up becoming its own show called The Union of the Unwanted, which you can find also on YouTube. It's live streamed every other Monday on YouTube. We just did one this past Monday. The audio was just uploaded actually today, a little bit ago, so you can find the audio now up. But that is more of a roundtable discussion show where we bring a lot of different people on to kind of share their ideas and perspectives and kind of bounce ideas off each other, because we do have a lot of different backgrounds and different research that they're looking into. And so it's fun to kind of get everybody's perspective from wherever they're coming from or whatnot. And then we've sometimes have some amazing special guests on there. Roseanne Barr's been on that show. G. Edward Griffin, Del Bigtree, Jim Florentine, a bunch of awesome guests. Typically they're on the Ripple Effect podcast. And then once I build that relationship, I invite them on that show. So whatever you like, if you like a roundtable discussion, you have the Union of the Unwanted. If you like a more personal show like this, where it's one-on-one, you have the Ripple Effect podcast. But like you mentioned, they were both for the purpose of trying to do something fulfilling and putting back something meaningful in the universe, hoping that we can kind of create some ripple effect of change.
Right on. And how many podcasts have you done? It's quite a bit, like 500 plus, 600?
Yeah, not quite 600 yet, but yeah, it's 500 plus. I've slowed down a little bit of late. Life kind of gets busy, and it's hard to kind of put them out of late. Usually in the winter, because my full-time job is we run a little family construction company. In the winter, when things slow down, I can put out more episodes and really focus on getting out content. But yeah, I've been doing it since 2013. I try to get a episode a week or every other week out. And then, like I said, life gets in the way. So sometimes that changes. But I always tell listeners, I'm like, please just subscribe and just hold on. I know in a world of like short attention spans, there's always a concern of people just losing interest if you're not constantly putting out stuff. Sometimes it seems like people who just put out content, even if it's not great content, they're rewarded just for consistently putting out a lot of content. But for me, it's like, I also think life experience is important, and time to reflect on topics is important. Like, for example, this Monday's Union of the Unwanted, obviously we just had a Charlie Kirk assassination, the free speech stuff. There's kind of some hot topics that everybody's kind of giving a quick take on. And we thought about doing a emergency Union of the Unwanted the Monday prior. And then, I thought about it. I'm like, you know what? Let's give it some time. Like, instead of like us all going on a show and giving a quick take and just in the spur of the moment, giving your opinion without like really having time to digest all the information and seeing all the information. Let's give it a little bit of time. And that's kind of how I've always dealt with things. Like I'm not one to do a podcast on a hot topic right away. It's sometimes I'm curious with it and I want to bring an expert in and kind of expand on the topic. But I try to, give myself time to, to really gather some information, really go through my thoughts and really try to figure out how do I feel and listen to people from both sides or multiple sides to try to really help mold my own opinions. And I don't think we do enough of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's very wise. And it's kind of like I was sharing earlier, taking control of your life and your attention. It's not all about content. It's not all about work. It's about, being still, enjoying life. So you've been in the game for a while and, aware of the conspiratorial view of history, as J. Edward Griffin references, the conspiratorial view of history. What would you say are some of the differences, some insights that you've had being a conspiracy researcher since 2013 or before? Because I woke up in 2002 and have been just knee deep in it the whole time. And it's a totally different ball game. Back then, this was even before YouTube, I guess, but there used to be some really great conspiracy documentaries on YouTube when it first became a big thing. And then they all started slowly getting scrubbed to where you barely even can find stuff on Building 7 nowadays. But anyway, what are some of the differences that you see in the conspiracy space from 15 years ago, 20 years ago to today?
Well, it's much harder, like you said, it's much harder to do research because a lot of that stuff isn't out there anymore. So if you're looking to go down a rabbit hole, it's very hard to even find that rabbit hole. On my YouTube channel, which I mentioned I just got back, and it seems like YouTube is giving a lot of people their channels back. On my YouTube channel, I do have a documentary playlist, and I just keep adding stuff and have to keep re-adding stuff because things will just be taken down. But they are out there. People are uploading stuff and gems of like great, old conspiracy podcasts that are really important historically, and people are still uploading. So, and people can still find it. But yeah, it's gotten much harder to do research. You can't just go on YouTube or go on Google and just find alternative perspectives and opinions and whatnot. It takes a little bit more work. It takes a little bit more time. So, I think that's the big change. I think many of us see that, like just doing our own personal research on topics. Most of the time you're initially force-fed mainstream narratives, and as you go deeper down the rabbit hole, you realize like what you're being fed is all a part of social control, and it's all everybody's a psychological, study basically, and they're feeding you information. They're not feeding you other information, and they're seeing how you react to it. It's what social media does. It's what Google does. Dr. Jeffrey, oh my God, what's his name? Epstein, who he's kind of a whistleblower per se, where he's been on Rogan's, he's been on my show, I believe twice. He's been on Rogan's show a couple times, and he has a nonprofit organization that really dissects how exactly Google will influence the way you think, the way you perceive things, and all this stuff. I mean, one example he kind of gives that he talked about on my show and on Rogan's was how Google during one of the Trump elections, I believe probably the first one, how they would purposely send little reminders to vote to people who would, because obviously they have all your metadata. They know more or less who you're going to vote for or who you're more likely to vote for. So they would send reminders to vote for people who were left-leaning and not people who are right-leaning, which seems kind of insignificant. But I guess statistically, they prove that it did sway voting a little bit. It did nudge things a little bit. It did have some effect. So it was just one example, but all these little methods, all these little techniques, little by little, can make a big difference in regards to, just swaying the public. And a friend of mine, and I'm sure you're friends with him too, because everybody in the alternative media community loves him, Richard Grove. He has a great documentary called State of Mind, The Psychology of Control. It's an oldie but goodie. I believe that's on my documentary playlist also. And it really goes into like historically how the elite, the rulers, for lack of a better term, have always attempted to find ways to control the masses. And, for a long time, they did it with force. And then then they did it with propaganda. Now they do it with both force, propaganda, and, technology. And that's the thing we got to be aware of. I remember having somebody from the documentary, The Corporation, which was a huge Canadian documentary back in the day, and they dissected all the methods that corporations use to influence your decision making, and all the psychology and development and research that went into like the music that they picked, the lights, the colors, the celebrities, the faces that they use to represent their products. Like everything is well thought out. When you pick up a Dorito, the reason why you can't put a Dorito down is because all the artificial colors, textures, smells, everything is designed to psychologically, affect you in the manner that you can't put it down and you have to keep eating it. So, that's the thing we got to be wary of. And as a parent who understands like, these issues with technology and all the research and development that goes into making sure that we're addicted to the blue screens and we're addicted to the apps and the social media platforms. I'm also constantly like making sure my kids are busy, playing multiple sports, always outside, always, just doing something other than being on a screen. Because I think, like, you mentioned, I believe you mentioned about us just, being depressed and finding fulfillment. Like, we're happier when we're around others and we're doing things physically and emotionally, and we're involved in communities. And when you play sports, when you have hobbies, if it's playing music, you have a little music community, the people you play music with. If you play soccer, you have your soccer community, the people you play soccer with, your coaches, your parents, your teammates. And creating these communities gives you meaning, gives you a purpose, gives you a community if you need advice, if you need help. And that's kind of the way we're supposed to live. And I think we're optimizing our lives and ourselves when we're around others and we're doing those type of things. And I think parents, a lot of times they use the screen as just a easy babysitter. It's much cheaper than paying a real babysitter. So it's easy to give them a screen. And then they get mad when their kids can't put it down. But those things are engineered to not be able to be put down. And that's the thing that we have to consider. And we also have to consider the fact that if you focus too much on working and putting food on the table and making sure your kid goes to, can afford to go to a private school instead of a public school, and if you're not around your children, then those tablets, the YouTube videos, the algorithms, everything's going to be molding their worldview. And I know in my personal life, like I know people who were just workaholics, always at work, trying to do the right thing, like trying to afford to live in a nice community, trying to afford to put their kids in the best schools. And then their kids get older and they're like, I don't even recognize this child. Like, I don't, like, their worldview is drastically different than their parents. And they've been brainwashed by media, by TV, by YouTube, by social media, by celebrities, by Instagram. And then, in some cases, it's too late to try to get through to them. It's almost like they've been brainwashed by a cult, and you can't snap them out of it, and you can't get your kids back. And that's always the concern. And we should be present as much as we can, because like I said, if you're not answering the questions that your kids are asking, and you're not helping mold their worldview and their perspectives, then something else is, and you might not like, the information that they're gathering.
All right, we're getting into parenting. I love it. It is a struggle. And, we think about our kids. I do my very best to not be hypocritical, because I'm hip to the algorithm attention machine, and I'm aware when I see them and they're on it, what I believe to be too much. And so I do my absolute best to lead by example. My daughter does a lot of dance 3 times a week. If she's not doing her dance practice, she's she's teaching at the dance school to younger classes and gets paid. It's really awesome for her. I'm really proud of her. My son doesn't have a hobby like that. We were never able to find one. We're in a smaller town. There's not a ton of options. And so he likes this little, what is it called? Roblox, this garden game, right? So I'm doing my best to keep him active and to engage him and to spend time with him. And I see it in them and I help coach them out of it. But I also see it in myself because I've been going through a trial and some relationship issues lately. And I find myself more gravitated towards the distraction machine than ever before. And I can tell myself I'm watching reels that are about, self-development and Christianity, and I'm staying on top of the news and stuff, but I can tell when I'm being sucked in. And so I think a key thing, not only for us adults, because it's probably easier to get the kids ensnared because it's all they know and they're raised in it in large part. But we adults are completely susceptible too. And we're just like grown children half the damn time unless we've done the work. So it's a challenge. It's a struggle. And they definitely insert whatever messaging they're looking to insert. And the sad part is the freaking Facebook and Instagram, you have a conversation with someone, then you start getting served up ads and reels that are on that topic. And it can create this, if you're not conscious, right? Like I use AI. Do you use AI?
Yeah, I do.
He doesn't want to admit it.
Yeah, well, it's because it scares the crap out of me too. Like I'm like contributing to the issue, and I'm just like I don't want to use it, but in some cases it does, especially paperwork. If you don't know how to fill something out or whatever, or like logos, designs, thumbnails. I just recently started kind of messing around with it for thumbnails, just because all this stuff is time consuming, and it's stuff that it's like okay, like it's super easy. But there is a price for convenience. And, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Yeah, continue your point.
No, that's fine. I'm actually trying to make my podcast more conversational. So I'll start cutting you off too. You cut me off. I cut you off. It's conversation. Oh, yeah. So I think the important thing, if we're going to use these tools, because I get great benefit from social media, connecting with people, sharing about my life, marketing my business, learning a lot. If you go down a good rabbit hole of self-development, mindfulness, entrepreneurship, it pushes you and you can improve from it, but then you can get sucked in. So the important thing is if you're going to use these tools, ChatGPT especially, you got to do so with the layer of consciousness, being aware of the risk that can come from it, because there are most definitely risks, even for the adults too. We think we got it together, but then you become dependent on something. And then you're less likely to go and actually do the work. And it's that challenge because early on, I know that people were like, well, it's not creative at all what you're doing if you're going to use ChatGPT. But then I was like, well, it actually allows me to create more. And if you use it well, it's kind of like an extension of your creativity, engaging a computer system, right? But yeah, man, it's a struggle, and they definitely get you in these echo chambers and suck you down, and we see it taking place. So do you have anything else to share on that? Because I want to switch to the Charlie Kirk assassination, which is still fresh.
Well, I guess my last point is I've done some really in-depth conversations with Dr. Jessica Rose on this topic, because her, much like myself, is really afraid of the idea of AI. And a lot of times when we're working on technology, like, you get some guy who's like really career oriented, wants to, advance this technology, this idea he has. You're so caught up in the work that you're doing that sometimes you don't zoom out, and it's like, okay, what's the end game, right? And I always think to myself, like, if I had, my first BlackBerry today, like, yeah, I can't do a lot of shit with it, but if that's like the most advanced technology I have, I'd be fine. Like, I'm not gonna, like, I don't need the things that I have now. Like, it's nice to have AI, it's nice to have a phone that does a lot more, but we adapt. And when you really think about, like, are these things making our lives, I don't know, better? And I guess better is kind of subjective, but like, are we happier? Like, it might make, I think work wise it can help us a little bit, but I don't, at the end of the day, like, you need your online life or your career life, like that's one small aspect of your life. And if you don't have balance, then you're not going to be happy. There's a couple YouTubers that had like huge channels. One was like a streamer that would do like reaction videos to like metal songs and whatnot. And he just like he had a huge channel, like one of the biggest, type of channels on YouTube. He had to step back. He wasn't happy, and nobody really understood because on his videos he looked happy and he seemed like he was enjoying what he was doing, and he just had to kind of go away. And I'm like, I know he's making money. It wasn't a money thing because he has tons of subscribers, tons of followers. So I'm sure it was, it wasn't because he had to get away from it to go to a job that made more money. So what was it? And he had like a small little kind of going away video where he talked about how he just felt like, he needed to do something outside of YouTube. Like he didn't seem fulfilled. And you see that over and over again with people that spend a lot of time online, right? We call it social media. We feel like we're being social. It's supposed to connect us. But the people who spend the most time connecting online in real life seem the most disconnected. They seem the most depressed. They seem, and I don't think, and this is where, and I'll end this point with like a little of a hopeful perspective. I don't think any technology can replace human interaction. And I don't. And I think you see it with music, you see it with AI imagery, you see it like it's good, it's fun, but there's something missing. There's a human aspect to it that's missing. And we can't necessarily quantify it. We can't quite understand why the perfect song that's written in a way that's supposed to be the catchiest or whatever doesn't hit home the same way maybe hearing a old Iron Maiden song or old Metallica song or old, even older Doors or Led Zeppelin or whoever. Like it doesn't hit the same way because those imperfections, it's what reminds us that it's real and it's human and it's organic. And when something's too perfect, right? Like a lot of rock musicians, metal musicians hated techno electronic music because it sounded too perfect and it didn't sound real. And I kind of feel like that's what's going to happen, that eventually we're going to think that, AI and maybe even talking to a Gemini or whatever is going to replace, human interaction, or it's going to be a good alternative. And then we're going to realize like, this isn't the same. And I feel empty and it feels fake. And there's something about human energy and connection that we don't quite understand. I think there's a sense that we're missing or we've had turn off, but there's something there. And I highly recommend people checking out the recent podcast I did some months ago with Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell, who she's one of the leading researchers, the researcher for the telepathy tapes. She recently was also just, I think Sean Ryan podcast just released an episode with her also this week or last week. But I had her on a couple months ago, and you can't deny that there's some energy, there's something that connects us, there's something that we don't quite understand. Maybe it's lost information, maybe it's lost abilities, maybe it's a frequency that you need to be in the right state of mind to connect with. But when we say, hey, like this person gives me good vibes, that's not just a saying. Like there is something there. We might not understand it, right? Just like, our ancestors didn't understand why there was thunder or lightning, or they didn't understand, but they knew it existed, right? And so we know these things exist. We just, don't quite understand it quite yet. And so from a hopeful perspective, I just think that unfortunately we might go down this road, much further down this road, and it's going to take a while, but I think at some point we're going to realize like we're not happy and we need to live more like our primitive ancestors who they find tribes in the Amazon that have no signs of depression, no signs. I go back to Portugal. When I was 4, came to America, every summer was spent, like literally I did nothing any summer besides go back to Portugal and hang out with family. And I hated it because I'm like, all I'm doing is going back to Portugal and doing the same thing I do in America, hang out with family and eat. Like that's all we do, So I didn't really appreciate, I guess the idea of like, hey, I get to go to Europe every summer, but I never went to Florida, I never went to Cape Cod, like all the basic places like that, a traditional American family would go to. Didn't do any of that. Like I lived a very immigrant life. And But I would go back to Portugal, and at a young age, I would pick up on this. Like, I go back to Portugal. My parents were raised on a farm with no running water, right? They still lived in that lifestyle. So I'd go back and I'd be like, wow, I can't believe people still live like this. And I would like almost feel bad for them at first. And then as time went by, I would reflect on it. I'm like, every time we go back, everybody's so happy. Everybody's like in a good mood, and they don't have a new car. They don't have a house. They don't live in the suburbs. They don't, they don't have any of these material things that we think bring us happiness. But they have community, and they have each other, and they have, and I think their lifestyle in regards to like being a farmer, living these type of jobs where you work with family and friends and people in the community, and it's not you don't have a boss screaming at you every 2 seconds saying, you have this deadline and you got to get this, whatever. Like, I think that added stress, eliminating that and living, that type of lifestyle, I think contributes to. They have dinner together, which is really important. That's something I still, am very strict with. Like in my house, where like, hey, we all have to eat together. I don't care how late it is after the last soccer practice of the day. If my wife gets out of work late, we all eat together. We hang out together, because if we don't spend some time together, then we're roommates. We're not a family, right? And so I've lost my train of thought. But my point is, I think there's hope.
I love that. Yeah, and that's great that you do that with your family. We try to do it as often as possible. It's really meaningful, and I think those older ways it's weird that that's like an old thing to do. It's just having a meal together and connecting and talking about your day. Super powerful. And it's always like a pendulum. So things will shift to extreme like isolation with COVID, and then people started coming out of the woodwork. And I'm seeing it now, like shift with COVID, online courses cranked. I remember I launched Live Free Academy, my company, and we did a course in April 2021, and it exploded. And I was like blown away. It's not as easy to do a course and have it be super profitable and sell a bunch of tickets nowadays, but it's like everyone's online, everybody's behind the door, and now people are really attracted to in-person events, in-person experiences, and people definitely are losing touch. When you were talking about it being fake and people want that authenticity, speaking of personalities, coaching, courses, that's why people, everything is going to start getting more AI. Many things are going to become more AI, social media content, courses, like AI twin course kind of vibe, or let's make up a character and he's going to teach the course and spin it up in an hour's worth of work, have it reformatted and polished. But people are going to be drawn more and more to the authenticity, to the vulnerability, not just an online course or some sort of transmission where it's a human being talking to them, at least, even though it's behind a screen and digital and virtual. But they're going to be way drawn to like, let's get together and do a mastermind. Let's get together and do a meetup. Let's hang out and feel that vibe, that vibration. And then I was also thinking, if you take it even back to the 80s, it was a period of transition from analog records to digital CDs, compact discs. And I just got a record player a year ago or so, and I just love the sound. It's more raw, it's more authentic, and it's not perfect by any means. There's even the little crackles here, but you could tell like this is what it was meant to sound like. It's not always clean. Sometimes it's a little messy, and that's okay. Okay, great. Let's talk about Charlie Kirk. So we got about 13 minutes left. Somebody commented earlier, so shout out to Juliet for participating. Appreciate that. Juliet said we'll stage the conversation with this. Speaking of staged, she says, I'm of the opinion that the Charlie Kirk event is a psyop, and he and his handler, Erica Kirk, KKK, are good actors. So Juliet thinks the whole thing was a psyop, and I guess from the get-go, Charlie Kirk and his wife have been actors. Now, I will say that you could tell that they are acting at times. They're very polished. And that may be why they grew to such prominence, just having an attention to detail. Like when we put on events or I do online courses and stuff, like I have that attention to detail and we try to present it professionally, right? So that's one thing. What are your thoughts on these two human beings? Maybe it's been AI generated the whole time. People have seen them in person. I'm sure they really have. it's popular. There's always these little things like, well, here's the theory, but then what about this? But then what if that's a psyop? Anyway, what is your response to this, and what's your take overall? Just lay it out for the Charlie Kirk thing, because this is a huge deal.
Yeah, no, it's a huge deal, and like many huge deals, I think they're trying to get us to just accept the official story and move on, and I don't think we should do that at all, because I mean, I know this is kind of a hot topic and not a very popular opinion per se, but I have no doubt, at least at the moment, that one, we're being lied to about the official story. There's definitely some type of cover up going on.
We can always just assume that safely right off the bat, that the official story, we may not know exactly, but I'm curious to hear what you think happened. But we can always agree, like, okay, whatever the government's saying is a lie.
Well, a friend of mine, Sean Stone, was just on Piers Morgan with his dad, Oliver Stone, and Sean Stone's been on a bunch throughout the years. We've done a lot of talking about the JFK assassination. I've had James DiGenio, who's the one of the experts and consultants for Oliver Stone on his JFK assassination movies. I've had him on a bunch. And one common theme you see with all of them, and I've done shows on Malcolm X, on MLK, RFK, and all the assassinations, is that the official story is always a lone gunman. And then they want you to move on. And the truth is always much darker and deeper than that. And Sean Stone said that with Piers Morgan. This was, obviously he didn't have all the information, and still, we still don't. But he said, he's like, I don't know what happened, but I know that historically they've always said it was lone gunman, man, and it doesn't end up being a lone gunman. So I tend to agree with him. I think there is something to the fact that Bibi Netanyahu, his film was banned, the BB Files, right before all this stuff was going down. Kind of, it was a documentary that went deep into the corruption of him, his wife, his whole community, his whole circle, and just how bad of a person he really was and is. He was one of the first people to tweet about the death. You had Harrison Smith from the journalist from InfoWars tweeting in early August that he has some intel, some inside information that his Charlie Kirk's donors are not very happy about him being outspoken about. He was starting to ask questions about October 7th, and if that was a September 11th type situation where they were letting it happen for the purpose of justifying everything that came afterwards. And it kind of seems like that does make sense, because look at just how extremely in the other direction Israel has gone, and how far they've gone. And then you look at just all the inconsistencies with the whole the guy going on the roof and then shooting and then finding a screwdriver that supposedly he took it all apart in no time, but yet there's video of him running right after the gunshot, so he couldn't have taken it apart and put it in his backpack or whatever, or and then they said it was down his pants, but then you could see him bending his knees. There's all these weird things. And you had George Zinn, the guy who kind of was a decoy and took a lot of the authorities' attention, and that guy was at the Boston bombing, and he was at 9/11, and then he was now here, and then he had child porn on his computer, so which was a great way of shutting him up and just saying, hey, you can't talk to him. We can't we can't know who this guy is or why he did this or why he would randomly say he's the one who shot Charlie Kirk out of nowhere. It just seems kind of weird. So you have all these things. Then obviously Candace Owens has done some interesting work on this, and she's digging deep. Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith were at a Turning Point event not too long ago, and they were speakers at the event. And then Ackman and other donors to Turning Point was upset that Charlie Kirk let people who were outspoken against Israel at the event, because obviously they're donating money, and supposedly they were threatened. Charlie Kirk was being threatened. And then you look at a week or two before he got shot, he started openly asking these questions about hey, why can't we speak out against what Israel's doing, and how much influence do they have in U.S. policy and whatnot? And why do they have so much influence on U.S. policy? And is it because Mossad is involved with Epstein and everybody's blackmailed and all these things? So I just think that there's definitely more to the story. I think people need to keep asking questions and don't let them do what they want to happen, and that's move on to the next story and just everybody just throw their hands up and say we don't know what happened, but let's just move on. We'll never figure it out. And I think this was, I think he was dangerous, Charlie Kirk, because he was influential to the young conservatives, a lot of the young people, the under 40 people, the under 30 people. He just had a huge influence on them. And I think if you're Mossad, if you're Israel, then it's dangerous to have, because you already have the left who are typically, protesting against Israel, whatever. So you already have a huge portion of the left that are anti-Israel and speaking out against, what they're doing. And then if you have Charlie Kirk now influencing people from the right doing the same, you are now losing allies, and your ability to do, just any type of PR and make sure that people, don't hate your country or hate what you're doing. And you get some people who defend what you're doing. It's gonna be minimized. So I don't know exactly what happened, but I am very curious about all this. The timing seems weird, and usually if you're in this world long enough, coincidences, they're typically not just coincidences. You see enough of them, eventually they're not coincidences anymore. There's something there. Where there's smoke, there's fire. And it kind of makes sense, because you know what? No matter who's in power, everybody's pro-Israel. And it doesn't matter how much they disagree on other topics. That's always the one topic that everybody agrees on. I think Charlie Kirk was a America First guy. And I think many other conservatives that are America First, they're America First, except when we're talking about Israel. And he's like a America First always guy. And I think that was kind of butting heads with some of his donors and others. And so it's interesting. I'm really hoping that people keep investigating this, keep asking questions, and we can keep exposing more information. I mean, there's so many cameras, and there should be so much. The text message was, and we talked about AI before, everything from like cell phones to AI dissecting the videos and the text messages, and people exposing the fact that like, hey, those text messages don't seem organic. They seem like they were not between two young males, just writing each other. There's no slang. There's no, there's words being used that usually officials use. So there's a lot of weird stuff going on. So hopefully people will do some independent journalism and keep researching, keep asking questions, so this doesn't turn out like every other assassination in American history, where we just never find out and there's never really any real justification for the tragedy. And I mean, one thing that has drove me nuts too is just how people have used it to talk about how they disagree with him. I'm like, how is that? Like, disagreeing with him is not really relevant. Like, if somebody from the left, a Bill Maher, a Jon Stewart, or whoever gets shot, and he's a parent, and they have families, and they have loved ones, and if they have, like, I'm not gonna like, when they get shot in a tragic manner, and the only harm they've ever done is have a opinion maybe I don't agree with. Like, nobody should be celebrating that, and nobody should be bringing up in that moment. It's like not the time. It's almost like going to a funeral or a wake, and then that being the time that you're like, yeah, that fucker owes me some money. He died before he he paid me back. It's like, yeah, okay, that's great. Maybe he did owe you some money, but now's not the time to maybe to bring it up. It's like, it's same thing with like, I'm getting people coming up to me at the gym and going at places like, oh, but everybody's acting like he's a martyr and he he was this genius, and I disagreed with him on so many different things. I'm like, yeah, but I'm like, well, how is that even relevant? I'm like, that's not relevant at the moment. Like, okay, I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of people I disagree with sometimes, and I'm like, I wouldn't want anything bad to happen to them, and they don't deserve to die in that manner. And the way I look at it, it's like, okay, if it was and God forbid, if it was like, a war criminal, whoever, like, throw out a name, nobody wants to see somebody die in that violent manner. But like, if it was a Henry Kissinger, if it was somebody who, like, you could you could kind of understand. Like I could see if I was from one of those countries that he was involved in like just completely raping of resources and killing innocent people, I could kind of see the anger. I could understand it. But when it's just a content creator, when it's just somebody with opinions, like that's way too far. Like I can't even start to understand the justification for that. Like words are not violence. You know, you can you until there's laws to that. Like I mean, if again, and this is why the freedom of speech thing is so important, because it's like it exists to protect unpopular speech. It exists so people can openly speak out. And the thing is, like, you know, my wife was talking to me about this when the Charlie Kirk thing happened. She's like, that could have been you. And, you know, obviously I'm not as influential or I have a huge platform like him, but like any of us, you, myself, anybody who puts their opinions online, right? We could have somebody who radically hates us and wants to, you know, cause violence to us, all for just having an opinion. And then what happens is that if we say that's okay, or we let that go, or nobody speaks out and says that's wrong, then what ends up happening is that people get afraid to speak out. And then what? Right? So I don't think people are putting that in perspective. And, you know, we had Pasta from the Pasta, well, I don't know what show he's doing now, but he used to do the Convo Couch show and whatnot. And that's when he was on the Union of the Unwanted Monday. That's one of the things he brought up was like, hey, like, you know, Charlie Kirk, I didn't agree with him on this. And I didn't, you know, you know, he said some racist things. And I'm like, okay, great. Okay. Like there's a lot of people who don't like Tommy Robinson and call him a racist. I wouldn't want to see him get shot in front of everybody for having an opinion. You know, he's never physically harmed anybody, you know? So it's like, to me, it's just I don't know. The divide and conquer thing, it kind of reminds you it works, right? They do a great job of making somebody with a different opinion the other, right? And that's kind of what we do in war times, right? How do you get somebody to pull a trigger and shoot somebody, you know, from another country? You paint the picture of the communists, the Soviets, the Chinese, the Japanese, the whoever it is, the Koreans, you know, whoever it is, you have to convince the person pulling the trigger that person is not like them, and that you know they're the other. And it's kind of what they did with Charlie Kirk. A lot of people on the left kind of look at him like he's the other, he's not one of us, and it like almost justified the violent act of the assassination. But I'm kind of curious, John, what's your I know we're running out of time because I can't stop talking, but what's your opinion on it?
Well, the first things that came up for me are I was familiar with his work, and I would watch some of his debates from time to time. They're like crazy viral all over the place. And I resonated with his ability to create an argument. Same thing with Ben Shapiro. I do not like the guy. He's got pipsqueak vibes. He's definitely a Zionist, like far, far and far. Is that an expression? Through and through is what I meant. But I'm like, wow, this guy's really damn good at communicating and making an argument. So that's cool. Except he's batting for the other team, of course. I'm not a big fan of Israel in the slightest bit. Zionism, especially. I mean, the nation. It's a country and it's a people. No problem with people. Just it's this ugly philosophy of Zionism and the ugly things that they're doing to neighboring Palestinians and such. Not excusing what some Palestinians are doing to Israel and all that entire skirmish and struggle. But nonetheless, so my first instinct was like grief and wow, this sucks. And then immediately like, this is a really big deal. This is going to escalate things immensely in this country. Then I started watching his videos more, which I'm sure so many damn people did. And I'm on a, hence the cross. I've been on a deeper Christian journey for the past couple years, especially this past year and the past several months. And so I started like resonating more with his stuff on Christianity and Christ. And then I had, I was like, okay. And and a lot of his right wing, like anti-woke stuff, it's never been a huge issue for me. Like beat my chest. We got to stop the woke stuff. I do see what they're doing to the youth, especially. But a lot of his positions on some of this woke stuff, I'm like, Okay. That's not how I would communicate it so brashly, but he's got a good argument, you know? And then I started going to like, okay, well, what's the meaning? So that's my whole thing. Events happen, circumstances happen, but what meaning do we give to them? And the meaning that I took from it was like, wow, it's just really powerful to see how this is like a Christian revival kind of vibe. And then the conspiracy guy in me was like, well, maybe that's actually part of the agenda because it is getting pushed out. And so things happen and then they accelerate and push what it is that they want to happen as a result. Problem, reaction, solution. And then I was really impressed with his wife's forgiveness, whether she really feels it or not. Just that's a powerful thing to forgive your husband's murderer. And then another thing that I took away was I just kind of fed up with all these conspiracy folks that like, because I made a couple posts. Well, I made one post specifically like, wow, because I was watching a chunk of that big memorial thing. And of course, I'm aware that it was used by the Republican National Committee and that it was a big J.D. Vance, let's get J.D. Vance ready for next time around. And then there was a lot of people beating the war drum and adding fuel to the divisive fire. The left, the other, the left, the right, radical, right-wing extremist, radical left. It's just so dumb and dated. Like, come on, guys. I even see people that are good liberty, freedom people. The left. Even, I don't want to call him out, but well, fuck it. Sal the agorist, love the guy to death, but he's like, we got to start rounding up the left. What does that even mean? Who specifically? Anybody that thinks liberally? Or like, you're going to narrow down to this or that? So I just was like frustrated because I made a post like, wow, this woman just forgave her husband. And here's the quote, forgave the murderer of her husband. Here's the quote. It's like, this is what Jesus teaches us, radical forgiveness. And then sure enough, she didn't really think that. She didn't have time to really forgive. And the whole thing's a psyop and she's not really, she's acting and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, is that really what you're going to get out of this? Because here I am like, wow, forgiveness is so powerful. I need to forgive more. And then like, how can I be a better human being and a better Christian as a result of what I'm witnessing? What must it be like for the wife and kids above all else? So there's that. And then, yes, I got into this whole game in 2002, watching a 9/11 Truth documentary by Alex Jones. So I'm a conspiracy researcher at heart, but for me, that identity kind of played its role in my life. And now I want to be, I want to enjoy life and not just be like, what is the truth? Because there's it's really hard to even know. But if I was pinned down and you got to say, what's the real story here? I think that the Israel piece has got a lot of legs to it, especially when he was speaking out on huge platforms. And then you see the memorial and you're like, whoa. And you see the response online. And even like some of my high school friends from way back in the day, like everybody was like, and you're like, damn, this guy really had a massive impact and was crazy influential. So for someone like that, that's an up and comer in the Republican conservative movement, that's massive influence that had only just begun. Imagine building a career of 2 or 3 decades from that. And you're questioning Israel. That's not acceptable. So I think a lot of people give Israel too much credit. Like they're behind every single thing, right? Some of those people genuinely have some anti-Semitism in them. But for the longest time in the conspiracy days, it's the Jews. It was all the Jews. And I was like, it's not all the Jews. There's all these other factions. And there's even like Yakuza, Chinese mafia stuff. And I guess Yakuza is Japan. And there's the Anglo-American establishment. But then there's the old school Soviet thing and all these competing secret societies. They all come together in some areas. It can't just be Israel only. But to be honest, like after the Gaza stuff, and then I think we talked about Elon when we did the interview with me, I was more of a fanboy. I was like overlooking some of his more serious blemishes, just excusing it by him being a maverick, hell-bent on making humans a multiplanetary species. And that's why he's playing ball with the government. And then it was a huge eye-opener for me when he went and did this apology tour and kissed the ring of Netanyahu. And I was like, whoa, even the world's richest, one of the most powerful people are possibly in He's up there when it comes to even throughout history. He's got a lot of power and influence, and is like really changing a lot of industries. And if he does put humans on Mars, whether that's real or not, whatever, that's a big deal too. I was like, wow, even Israel got this guy to kiss the ring. Oh my goodness. And then of course all the Epstein brown stoning and all that stuff. It's like, okay. I mean, of course they're definitely capable of it. So that's my take. But it's like, what meaning do we give stuff? What meaning do we give stuff? And how far down the rabbit hole are we going to get? What's at the bottom of the rabbit hole? A feeling of superiority because we know more than other people do. I don't think there's ever going to be justice. It would take a mass movement in order to actually get justice and not in turn be crushed or labeled some terrorism, extremism thing. And a lot of people don't care. They don't care about 9/11. It's pretty clear what happened then. JFK, there's competing things. I think Roger Stone's onto something with the whole LBJ had something to do with it piece. And then, or maybe it was Israel too. That's another theory. But it's like nothing ever happens as far as justice. I think the ultimate justice that we can have, that's why I'm so into alternatives, exit and build. That's the real justice. Let's build a competing system that renders their system irrelevant and leave justice in the hands of God.
Yeah, I mean, they on one of the podcasts I was listening to, they talked about how in America it's almost more acceptable to question any other country in the world and even our own than Israel. Like that's like you get more backlash and it's more taboo to question what they're doing than anything else. And when you look at all these historical events, and I definitely don't think it's all, Mossad and all, whatnot, but there's a lot of things, like you said, that don't make a lot of sense. Like the fact that things like the Epstein files, which wasn't even wouldn't affected the election at all. Like, I don't think if Trump had never brought up Epstein, it wouldn't affected the election at all. Like, he was still going to win because people didn't like Harris and Biden was, obviously mentally ill. So I don't think it would. So, but he went out of his way to bring it up, and he went out of his way to kind of highlight that that was one of the things he wanted to do. He also brought up 9/11. And what's the common thread with a lot of these things is that there is a Mossad link to it. There's a Mossad link to Epstein with obviously Ghislaine's father, Maxwell being a Mossad spy. With 9/11, you have, some people believe that the dancing Israelis, and there's a Mossad link there. You can go back to JFK assassination.
Wasn't there like a Mossad text? There was an Israel text message that went out to folks.
Yeah,
Tucker just released some documentary about it. I'm anxious to watch it, but go on.
Yeah, well, he was supposed to release a 9/11 documentary that week that this all happened. There's a lot that happened that kind of got derailed. The Tucker documentary was supposed to come out on 9/11. He ended up postponing it. It came out, episode 1 came out yesterday, I believe the 23rd. You had the UAP hearings that week. You had the vax versus unvax hearings, which I had Dr. Paul Thomas. It was about his studies, how there's a correlation between the more vaccines you get, there is a link to the more health issues you're going to have. Doesn't matter if you stagger them, all of them as recommended or less of them. There's a consistent, a consistent thing where the more vaccines you get and the more often you get them, the more likely you are to have autoimmune issues, autistic symptoms, and cognitive issues, and all and whatnot. So that was kind of derailed too, that hearing. And I know Delv Bigtree and ICANN, his attorney Siri, was making a big deal out of this hearing because it was the first time publicly that they're having a official hearing where they're talking about this is evidence that there's that there's a link between these health issues and vaccines. So there's all these things that got derailed. But the thing that you said about Elon Musk is very interesting, because it's the same thing with Trump. It seems like if I'm just a spectator and I know nothing, it does seem like they're blackmailed, or there's something. There's a puppet master that is there's something going on. It's more than meets the eye, because I don't think Elon Musk, like you said, one of the most powerful business owners, entrepreneurs in history, a guy who could care less about pissing people off online or whatever, and yet he doesn't cross that line with BB. Trump, who seemed like he wanted to put an end to the war, is now like kind of gone silent with that. There's something going on. And when you look at like the Jeffrey Epstein story, if it looks like it's a Mossad blackmailing scheme, and if that's the case, Elon Musk has a lot of kids. I don't think it'd be too hard to get him at a party and him hook up with a girl that he didn't know was underage, so these things can happen, and they don't just happen, like they do happen. I mean, there's cameras everywhere. You have Kash Patel now saying that like Epstein trafficked people to nowhere. There's nobody, there's no. I'm like, okay, so there's hundreds and hundreds of victims. There's all this, arrows pointing in this direction that there's, and then you look like the Franklin scandal. You look at like the Casa Pia scandal in Portugal. You look at the Belgium scandal. You look at the Jimmy Savile scandal. I mean, this happens everywhere. And there's all this evidence showing that it was happening here too. And you're just saying that it's nothing, make it go away. Like, I don't know, man. I mean, the conspiracy side of me is saying that I think there's a very good chance a lot of these guys are blackmailed, and I think they have something on them. And I'm not to say, because a lot of people get defensive. They're like, oh, Trump would never do that. I'm like, it wouldn't take, like, you don't have to knowingly do anything. These guys are womanizers, obviously. Like, they've all been married multiple times. They have multiple kids. They like women. I mean, Trump has openly said he likes them on the younger side, just like Jeffrey Epstein. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that you're at a party, you're at a gathering, a beautiful girl comes up to you. I mean, we're all human. We all have desires and temptation. You get a little touchy-feely with a girl. You find out that she's 14. You find out that whatever. And then they say, hey, this stuff's going to go out. We got video on you. And he had cameras. He didn't have cameras everywhere just for his own personal entertainment. I mean, he had a painting. I mean, some of the paintings were absurd. Like the painting of Bill Clinton in the Monica dress. Like, if that doesn't say F you, I am your boss. You have zero control over me. I can humiliate you every time somebody walks in, they see this humiliation piece. Okay. And you can't do anything about it because I have power over you. Like, that's what I think when I see that. It's almost like, yeah, you can't do anything. I'm going to do like the most disrespectful thing you could do. I will put a painting on my wall, and I'm connected to all these famous rich people and celebrities and people of power, and I have all these friends in high places, and every time they walk in, they're going to see that humiliating piece of art of you in the dress just chilling in my living room. Like, that's absurd. Like, to think that, like, that's not a FU, like, that's a FU to everybody else. Like, he had stuff on everybody. Even when you see that one time he was being interviewed, like, he always had this look on his face, like he was arrogant, like he was untouchable. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think the rabbit hole is deep. But on a brighter side, like you said, don't get stuck in the rabbit hole with your feet hanging out, because it can be doom and gloom, and it can affect your mood. It can affect your relationship with your wife, your kids, your coworkers. And I think, like I said at some point during, one of my long rants, it is a balance, and you have to balance it out. During COVID, you saw it. We got so many people spend, and even myself, spend so much time trying to expose the elite and expose what's going on. And even though I think it was important work, I found myself like not being able to smile and not be able to enjoy the simple things because I was so caught up in, I mean, some of these Reddit people, they call them the Reddit kids, like the people who spend all day on Reddit, like, don't wonder they're all depressed and unhappy and capable of doing crazy things. Like, you spend that much time around all these crazy theories and all these other crazy people, like, eventually you become one of the crazies.
Yeah, for sure, man. There's so much to cover there, and the Epstein thing is just so obvious now. People are still Trump fans, even though it's obvious there's a cover job there. Yeah, definitely blackmail, definite brownstone. But I think it's important for us to take our power back and take our attention back. So, hey, I appreciate you coming on. This has been a great conversation. Would love to come on your program again sometime.
Yeah, and if you're free Monday nights, we'll have you on a Union of Unwanted. Our next one will be the 6th. Like I said, we live stream every other Monday. So we just did one Monday, the 22nd. The next one will be the 6th. And come on and hang out. I'm sure you'll have a lot of friends on there that you've done shows with and have talked to before in the past. So it's always fun because we always try to bring, random people and whatnot. And, it's cool before the show starts. You always get a guest. They're like, hey, John, I haven't seen you in a while. Or, hey, I haven't seen, so it's cool to have that feeling. But
what time is it?
Usually it's 7 p.m. Eastern time. Monday nights.
Cool. Yeah, man. You send me an invite. I'll check it out.
Yeah, I'll send you a email and just a little reminder and I'll put you on the guest list and make sure that you get the Zoom link for Monday and come hang out and push back, and it's hopefully a safe space where everybody can kind of agree and disagree. We've had some heated Steve from it was funny because Steve from AM Wake Up, his first time on the show, I had Roger Stone on, and he just like lost it on Roger Stone, and I'm like, no, we were supposed to be nice to each other here, even if we disagree. But he it was one of the first times on the show, and he was just like couldn't hold back. But that stuff does happen. I had Mel K with Greg Palast on the show right before one of the Trump elections, and I know that didn't go great for Greg Palast. He got jumped on, but I try to, I don't want to create an echo chamber. And I think that's something we should all do is and I think that's one of the reasons why people really enjoyed what Charlie Kirk was doing. And it because he wasn't just avoiding people and saying, I'm right and you're wrong, and I don't even want to have the conversation. He's like, well, I think I'm right. I think you're wrong. Let's have the conversation. And that's, I think, how we should be.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thanks, John.
All right. Thanks, man. Great conversation. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The one, the only Ricky V of the Ripple Effect podcast. Hope you liked the conversation today. I just want to reiterate, be careful going down that rabbit hole. Sometimes it's bottomless. Don't forget to smell the roses every once in a while. Enjoy life. Enjoy your family. And just try to stay balanced and have sovereignty over your attention. It's up to you where you point your thoughts, and it has a big, huge, it makes a world of difference in the quality of life you enjoy. If you focus your thoughts on things that you enjoy, that you love, that bring you fulfillment and joy. That's really what it's all about. This is Live Free Now Show, bringing you the news, views, tips, and tools you can use to live a free, prosperous, and healthy life. Until next time, peace and freedom, friends. Bye.